Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Murray Smith, Certified EOS Implementer, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And so we'll talk to. He has worked with over 60 businesses in a broad range of industries to help business get what they want. And so we'll talk to him about why do leadership teams struggle with clarity and discipline, and how to build accountability without creating fear or bureaucracy. Welcome to the show, Murray.
Thanks, AJ. Great to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Murray. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of leaders across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about leadership, clarity, and things around it, and much more. But before that, let's talk a bit about your journey, your background, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Yeah, great. Thanks, AJ. So I come from a family of engineers, but I didn't go into the family business because when I was a teenager, my dad would take me to the factory and I didn't like getting my hands dirty. So I wasn't one for staying in that business. So I went to university, was accepted into chemical engineering, but dropped out after 2 months because I just realised I'd end up working on oil rigs and that wasn't going to be for me. So I then went into Victoria Police for some 15 years. So I was in law enforcement and did lots of weird and wonderful things in there, operational work at the front lines and detective work and leadership and supervision work. And from there I went into much broader roles of senior management and executive roles in setting up regulators and restructuring them. And then from there, I was in other executive roles and then moved into EOS implementation. But what was driving me behind all that was, as that was all going on, I continued attending school. So whilst I dropped out of university, I then returned when I was in the police force and completed a Bachelor of Arts, and then went on and did a Master of Human Resource Management, Industrial Relations. But I had an itch to study overseas, so I went over to Harvard University, did an executive program over there to work out whether I could hack studying overseas. I worked out that I could, and then I applied to go back to Harvard and also applied to go to MIT, and I had a bit of a problem of being accepted into both, so I had to decide whether it was Harvard or MIT. I went to MIT and completed my MBA there, and then from there, when I returned to Australia after completing that, that's when I became an EOS implementer, and I've worked with over 60 businesses and done over 450 sessions with businesses in getting them what they want through using the entrepreneurial operating system.
Right, Murray. So what do businesses want from you? Means that they cannot do themselves, especially in this time of a technology-driven world and businesses.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. It's what they want can vary, but the reasons why they're not getting it generally do sit around those things that we're talking about today, around leadership clarity, but it's also around execution and the discipline to execute. And so we see a lot of people with great ideas, and what we don't see is the ability to translate that into something they can execute on every day. And so from there, what people are looking for, I sense, and what I know is a structure that's simple and effective, that doesn't take them away and make them a slave to the process, but allows them to execute and get the discipline to do that. So it's about just building rhythm in your business, but also understanding where that rhythm might take you.
Absolutely. So why is it that they are not able to do it? Why do they need you, somebody from outside?
Yeah, so some of the businesses I work with like the outside accountability, someone coming in regularly to say, hang on, you said you would do this and you haven't, similar to a coach, if you like. But I also come armed with the knowledge and the ability to implement the system, EOS, in quick fashion that allows them to get runs on the board really quickly. So they can certainly do it themselves, but it's a bit like when you do things yourself, it's not always perfect. It sometimes can be a hard slog. When you're using someone who knows the craft, knows the tools, they generally get there quicker, faster, and also in a better form. So yeah, there's no question that you could do it yourself, but I think with a lot of leadership teams, what they tend to lack is the ability to self-analyze. Like, it's very hard to ask someone on the leadership team to stand up in front of the rest of the leadership team and then tell them, this is what I don't think you're doing this well, and so forth. So there's that challenge of self-analyzing, which is problematic for a lot of businesses. So an outsider takes that pressure off and really allows them to focus on the issues at hand rather than the mechanics of running the system, if that makes sense.
Right, Murray. So, in terms of EOS, how should people understand in times of artificial intelligence? A lot of things can be operated, automated, and so I want to understand: does it have relevance in today's time, or does it complement AI, or AI complements EOS? How does that work in today's time?
Yes, look, it's a great question. I certainly incorporate a bit of AI in how I do my work. But there's importantly about EOS, it's not just about the system, it's about the people in the system. And at this stage, AI doesn't have the capacity to read the room per se, or really develop a healthy conversation, or take a leadership team culturally to a place where they need to have those conversations that other leadership teams don't. So whilst it's got its place, when we think about EOS, we're asking people to focus on 6 key components, which is vision, making sure everyone's 100% on the same page. Sure, AI can help with that, but it won't drive them there. The second component is people, making sure you've got the right people in the right seats. And AI can help you structure what that might look like, but it won't actually have the difficult conversations that need to be had between leaders and the people they lead about whether or not they're meeting what they're required to do in terms of their accountabilities. And then the third component is data, which is all about the numbers, and certainly AI can help with that. But it's one thing to have the numbers, it's another thing to make a decision with the numbers. And people will still need to make a decision about what they're seeing with the numbers. And then issues is the fourth component, and that's really about how do we solve issues so they go away forever. And again, AI can help that. But there's still a role to play for leadership teams to make decisions about where they're taking their business. And then process, that's really in the wheelhouse of AI. That's where I use it a lot, which is about building out processes for the business so they can be repeatable. And finally, traction is really about having the right meeting pulse, having the right rhythm, and setting the priorities that make sense. And again, AI can help with that, but still people, particularly leadership teams, have got to own it. You can't say that AI is accountable for that. People will be accountable for what they get AI to do in the current form that AI is, not suggesting that mightn't change. But right now, AI is the tool that gets people to where they need to get to. So there's a place for it, but culturally, they've still got to own it.
Absolutely. So how does your police background help or come into you implementing EOS? Will it be the same implementation like anyone else, or is your implementation of EOS that will be different?
Yeah, well, there's some statistics around implementation, and a lot of it is, yes, while the system is the same, there's really got to be a fit between you and the implementer. So every implementer will have a different style, and that's drawn from their various backgrounds. So there's a lot of implementers that come from a background of, they've run their own business, they happen to run it on EOS, they thought this was great and they want to help others, so they become an implementer. For me, it was a very different journey about, and your reference about, how did it help being in a police force? Well, there's a couple of things with that. And the first one is perspective. Okay, so a lot of the issues that we're dealing with daily in business are important, but when we think about the bigger issues around that are occurring around our communities and so forth, we've got to put the perspective in them that let's not treat every issue like it's life or death, because it's not. Let's just make decisions. And importantly, with my work in the police force, very regularly making decisions about what needed to happen. But equally, we were making those decisions sometimes with not all the information, and we still had to make them. So what I'm bringing to the room in terms of implementation from that perspective is the ability to say, come on, let's just make the call here. We've got enough information. We know what needs to be done. Let's go. It's not a life or death decision here. Let's make the right decision with the information we've got. And if it's wrong, that's okay. We'll adapt, we'll change, and we'll move on. And at least we know what doesn't work. So there's a lot of that comes through. And there's a lot of structure that comes through with that as well, and discipline, of course. So I bring that to who I implement with. And sometimes I can be pretty blunt about that. And that's okay. That tends to resonate with the people that I work with.
Right. You have worked across, 60 businesses plus. So are there any particular industry specific that this particular thing will work better? Is there a trend, or is it agnostic?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And I've got to say that I've worked in I've worked in technology, finance, construction, retail, banking, healthcare, whatever it might be, and it's universal, some of the frustrations people are feeling regardless of the industry they're in. So EOS is pretty agnostic from that perspective. It can work really well in any industry. What's really important is that the leadership team that's buying into it, that I'm working with, they've got to lean into it. If they're not going to lean into it, they won't get what they want out of it. So they've really got to commit to the process. And if they do, they'll get a great outcome. If they half commit to it, they'll still get an outcome. It'll still be great, good. It won't be great, but because it's a do no harm system, if you do any of it, you'll get a better outcome than what you're doing now. But to get the best, you've really got to lean into it. So industry, not so much. It doesn't really matter. It's really about the people in the room that matter.
Right, Murray. You put a lot of emphasis on decision making, and I want to understand, such brilliant people, leadership, why do they struggle with clarity and discipline that can help me? Why is it so?
Yeah, so you see it play out with decision making for a couple of things will happen, and sometimes people won't feel empowered to make decisions. They're not exactly clear to the point of clarity what they're accountable for. So because they don't know that they're entirely accountable for a particular aspect of operations, say, okay, well, I'm accountable for sales, so that means sales and marketing, so that means I'm accountable for lead generation. I might be accountable for digital presence, closing leads, and account management, for example. If they're not clear that they're accountable for that, then they're not going to make decisions around that. They'll say, oh, I'm not really sure if I can do this. I'll have to defer to someone else, and then they're not making decisions. And the other aspect that will hold people back from making decisions in their role is, as I alluded to earlier, they think either they need all this information to actually make a decision, so it delays it, and therefore, because they think they need all that information, then they'll be uncomfortable if they have anything less. The other aspect is, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to decision-making. But if you do have a one-size-fits-all approach to decision-making, then what will happen is things will slow down. And by that I mean, if you think everything requires, it is a life and death decision, and you'll put, that amount of thought into it, then you are going to slow down. But if you look at the circumstance you're in, understand what the outcomes of your actions might be, then it'll free yourself up. So a lot of it's about being clear about what you're accountable for, and it's also understanding that you don't need all the information that you might think you need, and also understand what are the outcomes of the various choices that you've got. And if they're not going to kill the organisation, well, then just go and make the decision. If they are, spend some more time. But generally, people are hand-wringing too much, to be honest. AJ, with this sort of stuff, and they really need to be better.
Right, Murray. Who is your ideal client? When do you come into the picture? How do you get that organization started?
Yeah. So it's interesting. The ideal client for me and businesses I work with are between 10 and 250 employees. They're privately held. They'll have a leadership team in place that's more frightened of the status quo than they are of change. And what's really important is that they lean into it. And when do they come and when do I get involved? It's when they're feeling enough pain, AJ, when they think, oh, and that generally is borne out in a discussion that I even had today. Someone rang me up and said, look, I'd really like to start EOS. And I said, my first question to them was, well, why do you think you need it? And understanding that. And so understanding their pain. So those frustrations that we see all the time, which are pretty regular, which is people want to scale and they don't know how. They're always having people issues in their business. These are some of the indicators we'll see. Sometimes it's that they're spending so many hours at work, it's crushing their life outside of work. They may have tried other ways to make their business better and it's not sticking and it's not working. They're generally the frustrations that we see, or they just want to make money and they're not, is also one of those frustrations that we see as well. So that's generally the ideal client and what we see happen. So that's who I generally work with. Having said that, I work with businesses outside of that sort of description. And I really do that because the number one thing for me is the leadership team have got to want it. And if they don't, it's not going to work because they've got to own the system and drive it through the business. And if they don't want to do that, then it doesn't really matter what I say, it's not going to happen.
Absolutely, Murray. There is so much to learn about all this, and I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of leaders would want to connect with you from anywhere in the world, and I'm sure you will be able to help them and understand them that everything is achievable in business. What's the best way for them to do so?
Well, they can certainly go to my website, which is grip6.com.au. They can check out the EOS Worldwide website at eosworldwide.com. And, we do, in fact, some of my colleagues are implementing in India at the moment. So there's no problem there. We've got everyone covered. And if they want to connect with me, they can also do that on LinkedIn, of course. Just look me up, Murray Smith, Certified EOS Implementer, and I'll be happy to connect.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.